Hello, you guys. Welcome back to the Sweat Simple podcast. I just want to say before we dive into this episode that I so appreciate all of your amazing words about last week's episode. It was a little bit of a different episode, more of like a hype motivation, giving you some inspiration. So if you haven't listened to it yet, I highly recommend going back and listening to it, but it makes me so happy to hear that it resonated with you guys so much. I really do truly love getting that feedback from you, hearing what's helpful, hearing what's not, because really it's just me in here with my computer. So getting feedback from you guys, seeing that you're sharing it on your Instagram stories, leaving reviews, whatever it is, it really makes me feel like there's a community behind this podcast, which is ultimately what I'm trying to do. So thank you guys so much for that feedback, and really just keep it coming. But today, I am very excited about this episode because we are talking all about if healthy eating is enough for fat loss. And if you're listening to this podcast, it has fat loss in its title. So I'm going to bet that you have some sort of fat loss goal you've been trying to hit. And when most of us try to lose fat, we tend to immediately focus on quote unquote healthy eating. Most of us know that things like salad and fruit and protein are really good for us. And when we're trying to lose weight or just be healthier in general, we should probably be eating more of those foods. Those are the things that we're taught in like basic nutrition, elementary. We know that salads are healthy, fruit is good for us. And on the flip side, you also probably feel that when you're trying to lose fat, there's certain foods that you should be eating less of or potentially even avoiding completely. You know, foods like pizza, candy, chips, the things that you've maybe previously labeled as bad, or the things that everyone seems to be screaming, do not eat these on social media. I feel like every time I open up my app, there's some new person in the grocery store screaming about a food that we can no longer be eating enough. So one, that's fear mongering, just truly not the case. And truly, let's talk about like, is this enough? Is focusing on eating the foods that we're always seeing as labeled healthy and limiting the foods we're always seeing as labeled unhealthy, is that enough to actually see progress? In fact, you might even be listening to this podcast because you're already doing that. You are taking that approach. You're limiting the seed oils and the things that are being, completely demonized on social media. And you're eating a salad every day for lunch and you're still not getting anywhere. But rest assured, throughout the course of this podcast, we are going to answer the question, is healthy eating enough for fat loss? And the truth is that it might be, but it's not always, because health and fitness is not black and white. And in order to dissect that, in order to start getting into the nitty gritty, let's get down to the science of fat loss. In order to lose fat, you have to be in a calorie deficit, period. And if you are sitting here like, I hear that word all the time, I don't actually know what a calorie deficit is. That's okay. You are not alone. A calorie deficit is just a fancy way of saying that you're eating less than your body is burning on a daily basis. So it's the science of energy balance. In order to be in a calorie deficit, you have to consume less than your body burns on a daily basis. Now, that can be kind of confusing because if you're someone who has some sort of fitness tracker, you might be panicking right now because you see the calories that you've burned from exercise and you're like, how am I supposed to eat less than that? That is like barely sustainable. There is no way I could eat less than that calorie target. Don't worry. One, those fitness trackers aren't always very accurate when it comes to calories burned. But two, your body burns a lot more than just the calories your fitness tracker is telling you that you burned, especially from exercise. In fact, calories burned from exercise are typically less than 5% of our total calories burned for the day, which means that most of our calories burned are coming from just living and existing as a human. Things like digesting your food, blinking, listening to this podcast, if you're on a walk right now, that little bit of movement, all of that, just living and moving and doing human activities, that is where the largest chunk of our total calories burned for the day are coming from. And our fitness trackers just aren't really measuring that. Now, there are lots of different ways to get into a calorie deficit. You could cut out an entire food group, which is what keto does. You could restrict the time frame that you're eating in, which is basically what intermittent fasting does. You're restricting the amount of hours you're eating in, so naturally you're going to eat less foods. You could try eating all lower calorie, nutrient dense foods, which you might be doing right now when you're only focusing on things like salads and you're limiting some of those higher calorie foods like pizza, or maybe completely restricting them at all. Those are all different ways that you could get into a calorie deficit. The method itself isn't what actually determines, or the method itself really does determine how successful you are. But it doesn't really matter. What matters for fat loss is being in a calorie deficit in general. There are lots of different ways and methods of getting yourself there. The one that I personally like, and what most of my online coaching clients do, is track calories. Before we all freak out, I know that calorie counting has gotten a bad rap in recent years, but truly, it is the best way to know for sure that you're in a calorie deficit and give you the education along the way. So when it's done correctly, calorie counting is not meant to be restrictive or obsessive. It's meant to give you education, truly. This is very, very similar to how, if you were trying to save money, you might use a budget to make sure your expenses aren't more than your income. With calorie counting, you're just making sure that your food intake isn't more than your deficit target. Super similar to having a budget. You can think of it as a calorie budget. And all you're doing is starting to monitor your food intake so that you can see, okay, when I eat these foods, it's a lot easier for me to stay in my calories. I feel a lot more full and satisfied. And when I eat these foods, maybe it's harder to do so because those tend to take up more calories. It's not that I can't have those foods, it's that those foods don't keep me quite as full. So maybe I'm eating less of them. Really just starts giving you a lot of education so that you can be in the driver's seat deciding what and how much to eat in order to really make progress towards your goals. And that is where some people go wrong with calorie counting. They're not looking at it as education. They're setting their calories really, really low. They're getting really restricted with it, and they're looking at it as a means of dieting. But truly, no food or drink needs to be off limits. Calorie counting is all about education. It's about learning what a proper portion size looks like for you, which foods are higher in protein, giving you some of those cues around, like, if I eat this food, I stay more full after. I want to eat more of these foods. If I eat this food, I feel less full after. I probably want to eat less of those foods. That is what calorie counting is all about. Because here's the thing. When you're trying to lose fat, portion sizes and calories do matter. Period. They just do. And it's something that many of us aren't taught. We have completely bypassed our hunger and fullness cues. We don't actually know what a proper portion size looks like. We just see what's on the package, or we just see the plate that's brought to us at a restaurant, and we just assume that that's the portion that we should be eating. When really, the portion sizes that are listed on the nutrition label, those are just guidelines. Those are just recommendations. They're not going to work for every single body. Some people might need double that. Some people might need a little bit less than that. Same thing with food at a restaurant. That is just a standard plate that the restaurant brings out to you. And honestly, for many of us, it's way more than we need to be eating in one meal. But if you aren't tracking calories, if you never got that education about what a good portion size looks like for you, and you haven't done any work to get back in touch with your hunger cues, you're going to have a really hard time losing weight by not getting this education first. So this is why it's so important, and why portion sizes and calories do matter when it comes to fat loss. Like we talked about, that calorie deficit, it comes down to energy balance, and eating healthy alone probably isn't enough. Because like I said, many of us did not get that education about a proper portion size and how to really properly fuel our body to go about the day. And the truth is that healthy foods have calories too. Things that are really good for our health, like olive oil, avocado, nuts, can even be pretty high in calories for really small portions. And there's nothing wrong with that. Food isn't inherently bad or needs to be off limits just because it's high in calories, but it is something to be mindful of when you have a fat loss goal. And even more important than that, even more important than making sure that you're not overeating some of these healthy foods too, is that we got to be real and we got to be honest with ourselves. We are humans. And this is, I think, where we go wrong. We go into quote unquote diets with unrealistic expectations. We set these boundaries for ourselves. We say we're not going to have the pizza, we're not going to have the ice cream, we'll be able to survive without it. Like, we don't want it. But we're human. And sometimes you want to go out to eat with your family, or you want to be able to get the random ice cream cone. And so let's be real, we won't only be eating healthy foods forever. Like, that would just be another restrictive diet or another really restrictive way of losing weight. Just swearing off every single food that isn't healthy, it's not realistic or sustainable for long-term habits and weight loss. So if your strategy for weight loss, for fat loss, is just to only eat healthy, nutrient-dense foods and to limit those foods that you've labeled as quote unquote unhealthy, it's probably not going to be something you can stick to forever. Which is why, while eating really nutrient-dense filling foods is super important for our overall health and it can help us lose weight, it's probably not enough if your goal is fat loss. You need to also understand what a proper portion size looks like for those unhealthy foods. Because what a lot of people tend to do is swear off those foods for a short period of time. And then again, you want to go out to eat because you're social. You want to have a couple drinks with your friends. You want to go on frickin' vacation. But you have no idea how to enjoy any of those foods in moderation because all you've done is severely limit them or severely restrict them. You don't really know how to listen to your hunger and fullness cues. You don't really know that you feel better when you have 2 slices of pizza as opposed to 4. You never got the opportunity to learn those things because you've been so busy just trying to either restrict or completely overeating them. You never found that balance. And this is why it can be so much more beneficial to pair the two together, to pair healthy eating with calorie counting when your goal is fat loss. And this is exactly what I teach my one-on-one online coaching clients to do so that you can get the best of both worlds. You can get fat loss, but you can get fat loss while you're enjoying your life and doing so in a way that's going to make your results sustainable forever. You're eating nutrient-dense filling foods that will make weight loss feel easier and will be great for your overall health, but you're also learning what a proper portion size looks like, not only for healthy foods, but also for some of those unhealthy foods as well. You don't have to have a strict don't eat these foods or a super vague limit these foods guidelines, which is just going to lead to you not seeing many results. Instead, you can learn how to incorporate these foods in moderation while still losing weight. This strategy, this pairing of the healthy eating and the education with calorie counting is going to set you up for a lot more long-term success, education, and true long-lasting habit and behavior change. So to wrap it all up, yes, you technically can lose weight by quote unquote just eating healthy, but that can also be really vague and take a lot longer in order to see the results that you're looking for. So instead, I really recommend that you pair the two with healthy eating and with some education and tracking calories. With this method, you're gonna get a lot more info about the food you eat on a regular basis so that eventually you don't have to track anymore. Portion sizes just become so habitual that you don't need to track your calories in order to be successful. And I want to give you a little bit of faith that this is very possible for you. Calorie counting is never the long-term goal. Many of my clients, all of my clients, the end goal is to not be tracking once they reach that maintenance stage. Once you have tracked for a period of time, you have the education, you know what a proper portion size looks like for your body, and it becomes so second nature that you don't need to be tracking every single little calorie in order to maintain your progress. I personally have not tracked calories for probably going on 5-6 years now. It is not a forever solution. It is a short-term tool to give you that education, to help you build that confidence, to help you get more in touch with your hunger and fullness cues with some mindful eating paired with it. So then eventually one day you can transition away from it and still maintain all your progress, which is really the goal. Yes, we want to lose weight, but we don't just want to lose weight for the next 30 days. We want to lose weight for life. And with this method that I teach my one-on-one online coaching clients, I have full faith that you're going to get there. So If you have any questions after this podcast, if you are really unsure how to go about start tracking calories or how to best pair healthy eating with tracking calories, shoot me a DM. I am always here. I really want to help you guys. But in general, I so appreciate you being here. I really appreciate you listening, and I will talk to you guys next week.